good. Okay, everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. I have Candace Peterson. She is the managing director of consumer brand marketing. That is the lead of the entire global practice at Fleishman Hillard. Hey, Candy.
Hi, Michelle.
Yes, and she's also the host of Back of Napkin podcast. You got to check that out. And you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, it's hot marketing topics and the time that you can eat lunch. And so we talk to folks in the market about some of the hot topics and, kind of a tee up for our conversation today. That's for sure.
Absolutely. I was very, very blessed to be a part of your podcast just a few months ago, maybe a little bit more. And recently, you were part of an article that Medium published about how brands can stand out in a very, very crowded and competitive space. There was some great advice in there, but there was something that jumped out at me. But before we get there, I want us to have a culture soup moment. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, anytime our former president, the rock star, Barack Obama, opens his mouth, it makes news. And this time, man, it just went all over the place because he said something that rubbed some people the wrong way, but others of us, me being one, was like, rah, rah. He talked about the whole idea of being woke, right? And as individuals, especially on social media, there's a term that some people use. He didn't use this term, but woketivism, where you just tweet up a storm about your cause, but you never actually do anything. And ultimately, he was saying, put your feet to the action. And I think that speaks to authenticity, don't you?
Absolutely. It does speak to authenticity, and it's a topic that we've been having a whole lot of discussions on in the brand space, especially because we talk about woke washing and pride painting and all of these moments where culture is actually infiltrating how we approach the market and how brands actually talk. So it's a topic that is near and dear and to my heart, and always remaining curious, something that we're trying to crack the code on.
Absolutely. And it comes at me from two directions. One, the very name of this podcast, the Culture Soup Podcast, is, of course, everybody knows, comes from a keynote of mine where I talk about social media's culture soup. And woke is one of those terms that kind of gave birth, or at least its wings came from social media, especially from the Black culture. So to have people adopting it and using it in ways is very interesting. Of course, it's just the way it is. Nielsen told us that Black culture kind of drives pop culture. So here we are, and now we have from the other side of the fence where, my heart lies, leadership. And I believe that individuals and brands have to do certain things in order to lead. And one of those things is being authentic. So in this article that you were part of, you gave some tips and advice for brands to stand out, be authentic. That was part of it. But to avoid this whole thing of woke washing. So why don't we talk about what that even means? Because there may be people out there that just don't know.
So, woke washing is what I like to call like borrowing culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there are issues that are social, societal issues that brands are beginning to have a conversation about.
Mm-hmm.
While in some cases brands are doing it well, there are other cases where I like to say brands are kind of trying to borrow culture, and that's where it
Mm-hmm.
comes across as totally inauthentic. Examples, and actually I had the great pleasure this past year of being one of the judges at the PR Lions in Cannes.
Congratulations. I saw that.
You. Yeah, we saw a lot of work come through from amazing brands. There were, I think I looked at over 2,600 individual cases. And as we began to really study those cases, what became very evident was that there were a lot of really wonderful causes
Mm-hmm.
that brands were latching onto. And while all very noble, the problem was they just weren't authentic to who that brand was.
Mm-hmm.
And so while as an individual, I might have had an affinity or an interest in a particular cause that brand was championing, it just seemed fake, like an unwanted party guest.
Right, right.
Right, in many of these situations. And so as a result, we kind of were like, well, that one just stinks of, just trying to be part of the, the narrative of today and not
Right.
necessarily linked to their brand's mission and what they stood for and even who their audience was. And so I think it was just became a real kind of eye opener, at least for me as an individual, to think, gosh, I get really passionate about certain issues.
Mm-hmm.
And does it always make sense for me to counsel my clients to also jump in on this particular issue?
Right.
In some cases, no. In fact, it might be better to steer away from it because it just really doesn't align with who they are as a brand.
So I think you're touching on something that's really important. The cultural context that's out there right now. So much is going on
Oh my goodness, yes.
in every space. And right now, diversity, equity, inclusion seems to just be the hotness. I hate to say it, but that's where a lot of these brands kind of feel like it's time for us to jump in. So
Right.
there's this temptation that happens. But how do you do that gut check? Even as counselors, working with some of the best brands out there, how do you advise your clients? Yeah, it seems like the way to go. Yes, it's the right thing to do or say, but your brand may not align.
Yeah, I'm going to read a quote from our authenticity study. It's a study
Mm-hmm.
that Fleishman Hillard does. According to the study, 69% of consumers say that it's more important for brands to talk about their societal and environmental impact versus pure product benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hear a stat like that, gosh, it seems very obvious, like, oh, well, we need to jump
Let's
in
jump
on
on
that.
it. Right.
But if you peel back the onion, if you immediately do that, you cross a threshold, you can't back away from
No,
that.
you can't.
So, and as you know, social never goes away. So it can always bubble back up.
Right.
And so I think that it's really important as we look at these societal issues is to see how they rank against your own business priorities.
Mm-hmm.
I think that to me is my greatest counsel is that look at who you are as a business.
Mm-hmm.
What are your values? What are your mission?
Mm-hmm.
Take those and line them up to the societal issues of today. It will become very evident where there's an alignment and where there is a chasm. And I think where we're seeing brands falter is when they jump in on an issue that really doesn't point to who they are as a brand.
Right.
So we like to say it's about looking at knowing who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your voice? What you stand for. What are the issues that you will absolutely fight for?
Right.
And then the ones that you're never going to
Right.
get into the mix on. So you need to actually have that alignment with your senior stakeholders in order to assess these issues as they bubble up. Because Michelle, as you stated, culture is not going away. In fact, it's becoming more and more of kind of the surround sound to the
Mm-hmm.
environment that these brands are living in. And so it's really important that companies take that time to do the due diligence and really have those hard conversations internally. And it's not just from an external marketing standpoint, but it's also understanding that employees are part of your brand now.
Right.
If I look at, a recent example of employees actually kind of creating a marked change and a bit of a crisis for a brand was with Wayfair, where the employees really stood up to the company when they were very upset that when they found out that Wayfair was actually delivering beds to the border in Texas. And, they were saying, we don't believe in this. And, we don't want to make money off of a situation that we don't support. And so had they had some conversations
Right.
about this in advance, and of course, crystal ball, I'm not
Right.
but I would imagine that they probably had those conversations since about,
Right.
what things do we want to align with as a brand to try to avoid even some of these reputational risks?
Well, and it's interesting because this is really, it's a leadership tenet for brands and for individuals. I like to say to clients and when I'm up on the platform that you really should be walking your talk out.
Absolutely.
And so by the time you get on social media or you do a public relations campaign, you're just amplifying something that is true to you, true to your story. And maybe one of the litmus tests is, are we really in this community? Are we really doing something before we amplify with a campaign?
Yes.
I think about the whole idea of appropriation, and appropriation really is about taking advantage or amplifying the culture, but not doing something for the community that produced that culture. So, do you see that there are brands out there that are jumping on board to topics that may align with their storyline, right? Their
Yeah.
values, but have you actually done anything for LGBTQIA
Right.
until now?
That's a excellent example. And again, back to the borrowing culture versus actually being part of it. I would say a example of a brand that I think did something really, really well was L'Oreal. This past year, actually, they won a Gold Lion for it. So
Wow.
Within the diversity and inclusion conversation, age has become part of that narrative. I mean, if you've been following social media the past couple of weeks, okay, boomer has just been all over the place.
Yeah.
So this actually comes from the opposite side and talking about ageism. L'Oreal created the first issue that was completely designed, developed, the editorial, the photography, everything was done by women that were over 50. And that was based on a statistic that they had found that women over the age of 50 were disproportionately represented in the fashion industry. And so they actually took a stance and said, we're not just for younger women, we are for all women. And so in a very bold manner, they worked in partnership with Vogue and developed what they called the non-issue. And again,
wow.
Every single aspect of it was done by women who were in this population of over 50. And I think walking the walk, they did a great job because they very well could have done an issue and had anybody of any age contribute. But I think they did such they were so critical about how they approached it and really curating a team to work on this particular issue. It left no room for error because it was for the population that they were trying to serve.
Well,
and I just think it was a really excellent and beautiful execution.
I have to check it out. You raised a very important point here that L'Oreal was insightful enough to act on. And that is, you may have the values. It may align with your values. You may have the insight. You may even have the track record. But if you don't have a team that actually reflects the story that you're trying to tell, how can the wheels come off the wagon? We've seen it before.
Oh, preach on that. We have seen it before. And there are a lot of brands that have jumped in the conversation and had absolutely the wrong mix of people contributing to that. And it comes across as inauthentic, as you know. I think diversity of thought is definitely something that needs to be part of the mix. You can't say that you have a diversity and inclusion initiative if your workforce doesn't reflect reflect that, right?
And your marketing team, because sometimes the entire slew of your employee, population can be very, very diverse. But as you get up that food chain into these rooms where these types of decisions are being made, then it thins out.
Absolutely. There have been, as you know, with women in the creative space, a number of years ago, the 3% conference was started, and I laugh because I'm like an original 3%er.
You're like, when do we increase to 5 or 6?
Yes,
or 10?
And women in advertising and marketing, obviously, we are just one group of a number of poorly represented populations. So it is nice to see that there is conversation happening about the desire to make change here. I think it still remains to be seen an actual change and kind of an increase in better representation of all parties. But we're working on it.
It's awesome,
sure, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. Candy, you got to tell us a little bit about your story. Now, you weren't just born at Fleishman Hillard.
No,
you have a track record that is amazing. in the advertising and marketing space. So
Well,
tell us a
thank
little
you.
bit about what brought you to here.
Yeah. So I'm actually a classically trained art director. When I went
Okay.
to college, I thought I wanted to design print ads and TV spots,
Wow.
which I did. I
Hmm.
started my career at Ogilvy and Mather and worked at a number of bigger brand agencies for a large part of my career, and kind of worked my way up the chain to executive creative director. And then, gosh, it's going on 6 years now that I came over to Fleishman Hillard. And, had I originally in my career, if you'd asked me if I would end up at a communications firm, a
Hmm.
public relations kind of historic big firm like FH, I would have said, well, that just seems like that would not be my path. But, you know, much like culture and permeating all
Hmm.
things that we do, the lines have truly begun to blur. And what I saw as enticing with moving into the more of a PR and communication space was that ownership of conversation,
Yeah,
Michelle. So I came from a world where, as advertisers, we own the conversation and we push it out and
totally.
one way. And there's a preciousness about that.
Right. And the
But
PR team was kind of at the end of the gate right before it went to the market.
Yes, exactly. And I used to roll my eyes at the PR people all the
Of
time.
course, there's a pecking order.
Yes,
You're
yes, yes.
Don Draper, for goodness sake.
So, but I saw the tables begin to turn because as social media became such a big part of everything that we did,
Hmm.
um, we lost control as a brand. And so
Yeah.
we would have our customers really kind of controlling the narrative. And that made me uneasy. And I just actually wanted to be a part of that. And so I saw that the PR partners were really owning that frontline conversation. And, I've always been a huge believer that brand and reputation are inextricably linked. And so
Yes.
if I'm unable to control the reputational part of the conversation, really that puts everything else that I'm doing at risk. I feel like it's unwieldy. I have no control over it. And so to me, having the benefit of being able to kind of play both sides of that coin and really understand how brand and reputation work together in
Right.
tandem was really attractive to me. And so fortunately, I followed that hunch and landed here and work with people that are far smarter than me, and I am really
Oh,
just every day so impressed by the work that the team here does.
that was the topic that I wanted to get into, how things have changed. There are people that say, oh, PR is dying. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting because PR practitioners in their truest form, if they are moving with the times, have become more of integrated marketers than they
Right,
have in the past. If they're really good at their game, and that's the language that the brand people speak, right?
right, right,
So if you could speak that language, you're at the table and you are impacting both brand and reputation,
right,
and
right.
that's just where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you have to be well versed on both the brand and reputation side. Integration is the word du jour, and I don't think that's going away anytime soon. You have to think about things through the line. So it's not just a single moment in time. Again, as we talked about it, especially as we're talking about these societal issues, as
Yes.
brand steps into this space,
Hmm.
it's going to create a conversation. Again, you cannot back away from it. And so being able to understand and I think PR practitioners do this way better than general marketers, is they actually kind of think through the scenario planning of what could happen,
We
right? So
have
it's not,
to. I mean, we're like
yeah,
frontline reputation. We're the
right?
guardians.
Exactly, the guardians. So, emotionally, it might feel really good at that moment in time and be like, oh, we've got this creative idea and we're going to, execute it today. But you have to think through, like, what is that going to do for the longer term reputation of the brand? And so
Yeah.
that's what I love about working here is that, it's tempered by, I call it calculated rebellion.
Oh, I love it. I love
That's
it.
the term I use. So it's like, we know we need to be bold. We know we need to be creative, but we're never going to do anything that's going to put our brand and our client at risk.
Totally. That reminds me of the very nugget and kernel that began as inclusion marketing when I was working at the big Fortune 9. It really was about, we didn't want to seem like we were infiltrating. However, we saw the need to be at the table and break down some of these silos, because what we see in a lot of these companies is you've got the brand people over there in their cubby hole, and you've got your reputation people, your PR people over here in this cubby hole. And by the time the content gets to the PR people, it's fresh, it's ready to go. And
Absolutely.
if you see a problem, you're really rocking a boat to say something at that stage.
Right. They'll be like, Michelle, wait, I'm sorry. You need to take this issue elsewhere.
Right. Or, just write a statement. Just be ready. Right. And you're like, we could avoid this whole thing.
Right. It's interesting. That actually brings up another point for why I really love being on this side of the fence. And that is that crisis and reputation can actually be used for reputational gain.
Yes.
A really, I think, beautiful example of a brand doing this very well. Again, this was a case that I was exposed to when at Cannes, was for a French durable goods company called Degoma. They actually make 3D printers. What they were seeing from the societal narrative was a lot of conversation about gun violence and obviously all the terrible shootings that have been taking place over the past many months. And they also discovered that there was a group of people, unfortunately, using their 3D printers to print 3D guns that actually were functioning. And so they saw this as a way that, again, going back to who they were and what they stood for, and they're like, this is something that we are absolutely against. And so they developed and open sourced software that scrubbed the interwebs and found the CAD files that were for these 3D guns, took all of them and secretly tweaked them, put them back out with the same file names. And so these people who were trying to print 3D guns, when they would print all the pieces and try to put them together, they didn't work.
I love it. Way to make news.
Yeah, and it did. It made so much news. But I think, again, an advertising agency would, maybe not approach it from that standpoint. But thinking about it from a PR perspective, it's like we are trying to really protect our brand and who we are. And this is an opportunity. We're not selling product, but we're selling who we are as a company and what we believe in. And I just thought it was just profoundly successful. And, again, they open sourced it as well, which was just really showcasing leadership in the space and reputational leadership.
I love it. So back to that article, there were some tips that you gave, and we really kind of concentrated on the one, don't borrow culture. But what were the others?
Oh, goodness. I'm going to have to.
It's all good.
So, another thing, again, going back to like really understanding who you are as a company can be your North Star for where you can authentically participate in these sorts of conversations. So that is definitely something that I'm a huge proponent of. I think to, making sure that as a brand, as you're trying to differentiate, really understanding from a societal standpoint, whether or not, attaching yourself to one of these kind of burgeoning societal issues really makes sense to helping you differentiate. I think, as you and I have both discussed, we've seen a lot of brands, adopt hey, we're going to jump in on the LGBTQ conversation. And it becomes a bit of a kind of a vanilla conversation because it's not standing for anything at that point. That sounds terrible. they're obviously supporting a very worthy cause, but in doing so, it's not, it seems like just a label that's attached to them, as opposed to, again, walking the walk
Right.
and doing things that actually create change and impact people in a more meaningful way than just a label.
Right. Right. This is awesome conversation. I love it. Candy, are there any clients that you guys have right now that are walking the talk?
Oh, yes, I think we have a number of brands that, we've had to talk through, from I would say like privacy is a huge one,
Mm-hmm.
that our clients are really showing up in a leadership position, and really trying to protect their customers' information. Of course, AT&T always is a shining example of diversity and inclusion.
Yay.
Yay, yay, your alma mater.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's yeah, I'm trying to. It's a good. You caught me off
I'm
guard. I was
sorry.
like, that's okay.
All good.
Yeah,
I'll
I mean,
edit
I think.
it. Don't worry about it.
So, are we? Yeah. Okay.
All good. All good. Candy, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thanks for coming on. Full disclosure, I think everybody knows this. FH is my alma mater.
Yes.
I cut my PR teeth in that very same office, Candy.
I
When
know, and
yeah.
I'm so glad that you did, because it was a reason why I got to meet you.
Yes, absolutely. At the table at AT&T at some brainstorm or something. Who knows?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think it was Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
trying to make sure that we're representing.
And I remember going, is that Carrie Bradshaw? And I know you get that all the time.
I do, and I love her. So
Yeah, Sarah Jessica Parker, but you're much cuter. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on the Culture Soup podcast.
Thank you, Michelle.
Awesome.
All right.
I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.